My name is Suzanne, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married for 12 years, or at least I was. Until that 4th of July changed everything. Picture this: my entire family gathered at my parents' lake house for their 40th anniversary, kids running around with sparklers, and my husband's phone suddenly ringing during dinner. When that woman's voice came through the speaker saying those 4 words that shattered my perfect facade, I did something nobody expected. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how one phone call destroyed my marriage but saved my life. 3 months before that explosive family reunion, I started noticing changes in Mark that made my stomach twist with unease. After 12 years together, you learn someone's rhythms, their patterns, the way they breathe when they're truly relaxed, versus when they're hiding something. Mark had started working late 4 nights a week instead of his usual 2. His financial advisory firm was busy, sure, but busy enough to require him there until 10 or 11 at night. The new gym membership came next, which would have been wonderful if he actually came home sweaty or energized. Instead, he arrived freshly showered, smelling like cologne. I never bought him. Our twin daughters, Amy and Grace, had just turned 10 that spring. They were at that perfect age where they still thought their daddy hung the moon, but were old enough to notice when that moon stopped showing up for their soccer games. Grace asked me one evening while I braided her hair for bed why daddy missed her winning goal. Amy chimed in from her bed, wondering if daddy didn't love soccer anymore. I made excuses about important meetings and grown-up responsibilities, but the words tasted bitter in my mouth. I work as a marketing director for a tech startup in Hartford, a job I'd fought hard to get, and even harder to keep while raising twins. Our life looked perfect from the outside. We had a beautiful colonial house in West Hartford, the kind with the white picket fence that sounds like a cliché until you're living it. Our Instagram feed was full of family ski trips to Vermont summer days, at the Connecticut shore, and coordinated Christmas pajama photos. Behind those filtered moments, though, something was rotting. The small things started adding up like drops of water, eventually overflowing a glass. There was the receipt for Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Hartford, dated on a night he'd said he was at a client dinner in Boston. The charge showed dinner for 2 with a bottle of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. When I asked about it casually, he said it was for entertaining a potential high-value client, that the company would reimburse him. But I knew his expense reports went through me since I helped him organize them quarterly, and that receipt never appeared. Then came the phone habits. Mark had always been casual with his phone, leaving it on counters, tossing it on the bed while he showered. Suddenly it was glued to him. He'd take it to the bathroom, sleep with it under his pillow, and jump when notifications came through. The screen was now angled away when he texted, and he'd added facial recognition that somehow never seemed to recognize my face when I needed to use his phone to call mine. My sister Jennifer noticed things at Easter dinner that I'd been trying to ignore. She pulled me aside while we loaded the dishwasher, our mother's chatter about her garden club floating in from the living room. Jennifer said Mark seemed distracted, that he'd checked his phone 17 times during dinner. She'd counted. When I laughed it off, she grabbed my shoulders gently and said the words that haunted me for weeks. She said I deserved someone who was present, who looked at me the way our dad still looked at our mom after 40 years. I wanted to trust my husband. Marriage is built on trust, right? That's what all the counselors and books tell you. So I pushed down the queasy feeling, ignored the voice in my head screaming that something was wrong. I focused on my daughters, my work, planning summer vacation to Disney World. I told myself that marriages go through phases, that maybe this was just a midlife crisis hitting Mark at 37. The breaking point came in late June, 2 weeks before the family reunion. I was gathering documents for our accountant, preparing for quarterly taxes, when I found a credit card statement in Mark's home office for an account I didn't know existed. The statement showed monthly payments for the past 8 months, charges at hotels during lunch hours, purchases at Nordstrom in the women's department, restaurant bills, always for 2, always at places I'd mentioned wanting to try but never had. My hands shook as I photographed every page. The rational part of my brain, the part that managed million-dollar marketing campaigns and negotiated with CEOs, took over. I carefully placed the statement back exactly where I'd found it, making sure the other papers on top were at the same angles. Then I went to the bathroom and threw up, holding my own hair back while my wedding ring clinked against the porcelain. That night I lay next to Mark while he scrolled through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something. His wedding ring caught the light from his screen, the inscription inside that read, "Forever and always invisible," but burned into my memory. I studied his profile, the jaw I'd traced with my fingers 1,000 times, the lips that had promised to forsake all others. When he finally put the phone down and rolled toward me, draping an arm across my waist in sleep, I remained rigid, planning my next moves like a chess game where I'd just discovered my opponent had been cheating all along. The next morning, after Mark left for work and the girls were at summer camp, I called Patricia. We'd been roommates at UConn, and she'd gone on to become one of Connecticut's most successful divorce attorneys. When her assistant said she was in meetings all day, I said 2 words that got me transferred immediately. I said it was urgent. Patricia listened to everything, then gave me advice that was both professional and personal. Document everything she said. Open your own bank account. Start moving money slowly. Get copies of all financial records. And most importantly, don't let him know you know until you're ready to strike. The 2 weeks between discovering that credit card statement and the family reunion became an elaborate performance where I deserved an Academy Award. Every morning I kissed Mark goodbye like nothing had changed. Every evening I asked about his day with the same interest I'd shown for 12 years. When he worked late, I said I understood. When he came home smelling like perfume I didn't wear, I smiled and suggested he shower before dinner. Patricia had given me a list of things to document, and I became a detective in my own home. While Mark was at work and the girls at camp, I methodically went through everything. I found 6 months of credit card statements for that secret account, all showing the same pattern. Lunches at hotels, always between noon and 2. Weekend charges when he was supposedly at conferences. A charge at Tiffany's for $2,000 the day after my birthday when he'd given me a $50 gift card to Target. The evidence gathering was strangely cathartic. Each discovery hurt less than the one before, like my heart was building calluses. I opened a bank account at a different bank, slowly transferring money from our joint savings. Not enough for him to notice, but enough to cover 3 months of expenses if needed. I photographed every financial document, every investment account, every asset we owned. Patricia said Connecticut was an equitable distribution state, that judges here didn't look kindly on affairs, especially when marital funds were used. The most painful discovery came when I finally got into his laptop. He'd left it open one morning in his rush to leave, and there it was, an email notification from someone named Alexandra M. The preview showed 3 words, followed by heart emojis. Miss you already. My cursor hovered over the email for a full minute before I clicked. What I found was 6 months of correspondence that read like a romance novel I'd never wanted to read. Alexandra was 9 years younger than Mark, 7 years younger than me. She worked as a junior analyst at his firm, which explained all those late nights at the office. Their emails started professionally discussing market trends and portfolio strategies. Then came the shift, subtle at first. Thanks for your help today. Became I really enjoy our conversations, which morphed into I can't stop thinking about our lunch. I read every email, though each one felt like swallowing glass. They talked about the future, about possibilities, about what life could be like if circumstances were different. Alexandra pushed for more, asking when he'd leave his marriage, saying she was tired of being a secret. Mark's responses were worse than her demands. He wrote about feeling trapped, about marrying too young, about loving his daughters, but resenting the life they'd forced him into. He called me controlling, said I'd gained weight after the twins claimed our sex life was dead, when we'd been intimate just 3 nights before. The affair had gotten physical 4 months ago, according to their breathless recounting of their first time. A conference room after everyone left. How cliché. How devastatingly common. They had a hotel they frequented, the Marriott Downtown Room 412, always if it was available. She'd saved the room key from their first time there. He'd bought her a necklace she wore hidden under her work clothes. I copied everything onto a flash drive, then printed the most damaging emails. My hands moved mechanically while my brain processed the destruction of my marriage. The man who'd cried when our daughters were born, who'd sworn he'd never be like his father who'd abandoned him, was following the exact same pattern. The irony wasn't lost on me. When Mark came home early that day, I was ready. I'd hidden all evidence of my investigation, closed his laptop to exactly the angle he'd left it, and started dinner like any other day. He kissed my cheek, said something smelled amazing, then went to play video games with the girls. I watched them from the doorway, my daughters giggling as their daddy let them win at Mario Kart. They had no idea their world was about to shatter. That night we attended Amy's dance recital. Mark recorded it on his phone, cheering loudly when she nailed her pirouettes. Other parents smiled at us, commenting on what a lovely family we were. The dance teacher said Amy had natural talent, that she got her grace from her mother. Mark's hand found mine in the dark auditorium, squeezing it during the finale. I squeezed back, knowing it was one of our last moments of pretend normalcy. Over the next days, I met with Patricia twice more each time, while Mark thought I was at spin class. She reviewed my evidence, said I had more than enough. We discussed custody arrangements, likely settlement outcomes, and timeline for filing. Connecticut required a 90-day waiting period for divorce, but we could file immediately after the reunion. Patricia suggested doing it publicly might work in my favor, showing I had nothing to hide while making it harder for Mark to spin the narrative. The family reunion invitation had been on our refrigerator for 3 months. My parents' 40th anniversary celebration at their lake house in Madison. All my siblings would be there with their families, plus cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends they'd known for decades. Mark had been looking forward to it mainly for the golf tournament my brothers organized every year. He'd been practicing his swing in the backyard, determined to beat my brother Tom, who'd won the last 3 years. As I packed for the reunion, I carefully chose my outfit for the big reveal. A red sundress that made me look powerful, confident, alive. I packed the girls' favorite dresses, knowing they'd need comfort items in the coming storm. Mark threw his things together last minute, as always, complaining he couldn't find his golf shoes. They were in the garage where he'd left them, but I let him search, enjoying his frustration more than I should have. The drive to Madison took 90 minutes, though it felt like hours. The girls sang along to Disney songs in the back seat, while Mark texted constantly at red lights. Each ping of his phone was like a needle under my fingernails. When Amy asked why Daddy was always on his phone, he said it was important work stuff. Grace said work was boring and she never wanted a job that made her ignore her family. Out of the mouths of babes. We arrived at my parents' house just as the sun was starting to set over Long Island Sound. The white colonial had been in our family for 60 years, the place where I'd learned to swim, had my first kiss, and told my parents I was pregnant with twins. The wraparound porch was already full of relatives' drinks in hand, children chasing fireflies on the lawn. My mother rushed out to greet us, enveloping each girl in the kind of hug only grandmothers can give. Mark immediately found my brothers and male cousins, beer appearing in his hand within minutes. He was in his element, the charming son-in-law everyone loved. He helped my father adjust the grill, complimented my mother's potato salad recipe, and threw a football with my nephew. Watching him, you'd never guess he'd been sexting his mistress during the entire drive here. That night, after tucking the girls into the twin beds of my childhood room, I stood on the dock looking at the stars. The same stars I'd wished on as a teenager, dreaming of true love and happily ever after. Tomorrow I'd destroy the facade in front of 30 people who'd watched me grow up, who'd celebrated my wedding, who'd thrown baby showers when I was pregnant. Tomorrow I'd become the family scandal everyone would whisper about for years. But tonight, I let myself grieve the marriage I thought I had, the future I'd planned, the family photos we'd never take. July 4th dawned bright and perfect, like the universe was mocking me with gorgeous weather for the destruction of my marriage. The house buzzed with preparation for the afternoon barbecue. My mother directed operations like a general, assigning tasks to everyone. I was put in charge of the dessert table, arranging the pies and cakes relatives had brought. My hands worked automatically while my mind rehearsed what was coming. Mark spent the morning playing golf with my brothers and male cousins, just as planned. They'd left early taking coffee and my mother's famous cinnamon rolls with them. I watched their cars disappear down the driveway, knowing this would be the last time my brothers would treat Mark like family. When they returned hours later, Mark was flushed with victory, having finally beaten Tom by 2 strokes. He picked me up and spun me around in celebration, and I led him smiling, like the devoted wife everyone expected. The afternoon barbecue started at 3. Relatives arrived in waves carrying covered dishes and coolers, children already sticky with sunscreen and anticipation for fireworks. My father manned the grill like always, wearing the ridiculous Kiss the Cook apron we'd bought him 20 years ago. The smell of hamburgers and hot dogs, mixed with the salt air from the sound, creating the perfect sensory memory I'd forever associate with the death of my marriage. Long tables had been set up on the lawn covered with red and white checkered tablecloths that fluttered in the breeze. Mason jars filled with wildflowers served as centerpieces, a touch my mother was particularly proud of. She'd seated Mark and me at the main table with my parents' siblings and their spouses. The girls were at the kids' table nearby, already engaged in a heated debate about whether chocolate or vanilla ice cream was better. As everyone filled their plates and found their seats, I watched Mark perform his usual social dance. He helped my elderly aunt with her chair, poured water for my pregnant cousin, and made sure the kids' table had enough ketchup. He was the perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect son-in-law. No one could see the rot beneath his polished surface except me. Dinner conversation flowed as freely as the wine. My brother-in-law told stories from his recent trip to Europe. My sister announced she'd gotten a promotion. My parents held hands between their chairs, 40 years of marriage making them move in sync without thought. Mark contributed appropriately, laughing at the right moments, asking interested questions, playing the part he'd perfected over 12 years. As the sun began its descent toward the sound, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, my father stood up, tapping his beer bottle with a knife to get everyone's attention. The chatter died down as he cleared his throat, emotion already thick in his voice. He spoke about 40 years with my mother, about raising 3 children in this house, about the blessing of seeing those children create families of their own. He thanked everyone for coming, for being part of their journey, for making life rich with love and connection. People were wiping tears, raising glasses in toast when Mark's phone started ringing. He'd left it face up on the table, the volume high enough to cut through the moment. The caller ID showed Alexandra M. with a photo of a young blonde woman. Before Mark could grab it, before he could silence it, he'd accidentally hit speaker in his fumbling panic. Her voice filled the air, young and breathy and damning. Those 4 words echoed across the suddenly silent gathering. I can't stop thinking about you. 30 faces turned toward us, confusion morphing to understanding in real time. Mark's face drained of color as he frantically tried to end the call, but I was faster. I picked up his phone with the calm precision I'd practiced in my mind 100 times. My voice was steady, almost cheerful, as I spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Why don't you come over? It's the perfect time. The silence was so complete you could hear the waves lapping against the dock. Alexandra's confused voice came through the speaker, asking who this was. Was Mark there? What was happening? I smiled at my frozen husband as I continued. This is his wife, the one you've been trying to replace for the past 6 months. But here's the thing, Alexandra. You can have him. Mark lunged for the phone, but my brother Tom stepped between us, his former football player build creating an immovable wall. I continued speaking to Alexandra, though my eyes never left Mark's face. I told her about the credit cards I'd found, the hotel receipts, the emails where she called him her soulmate. I mentioned the necklace he'd bought her with money from our daughter's college fund. That detail made my mother gasp, and my father's face turned purple with rage. Alexandra had gone silent on the other end, probably realizing she was on speaker at a family gathering. I took advantage of her shock to deliver my final blow. I told her she should know she wasn't the first, that I'd found evidence of at least 2 other emotional affairs over our 12-year marriage, that Mark had a pattern of finding young women at work, making them feel special, then moving on when reality set in. The call ended with her hanging up, the beep echoing across the lawn. I turned to address my frozen family still holding Mark's phone. My voice remained calm, though my hands shook slightly. I announced that I'd filed for divorce, that papers would be served to Mark at his office Tuesday morning. I'd already separated our finances, secured my own lawyer, and would be seeking primary custody of our daughters. The evidence of his affair, especially the financial impropriety, would make that likely. Mark finally found his voice sputtering about misunderstandings about how it wasn't what it looked like, how Alexandra meant nothing. The cliché of his protests might have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. He tried to approach me, but my brothers had formed a protective barrier. My sister Jennifer had moved to sit with Amy and Grace, who were watching with wide, confused eyes. My mother Saint, that she immediately went into grandmother mode. She gathered the children, suggesting they go inside to decorate cookies for the fireworks. The teenagers were harder to distract their phones already, out probably texting friends about the drama unfolding at the Nelson family reunion. My aunts and uncles sat frozen food forgotten, watching better entertainment than any soap opera. Mark's attempts at explanation devolved into accusations. He blamed me for being cold, for focusing too much on work, for gaining weight after the twins. Each word dug his grave deeper. My father, who hadn't said a word since the phone rang, finally stood. Robert Nelson was not a man of many words, but when he spoke, people listened. He told Mark he had 1 hour to pack his things and leave. He was no longer welcome at this house, at any family gathering in our lives. The dismissal was final, devastating in its quietness. Mark tried to salvage something from the wreckage, alternating between apology and anger. He said I'd humiliated him, that I could have handled this privately. My cousin Lisa actually laughed at that, pointing out he'd humiliated himself by having an affair. He claimed it was just a mistake, that 12 years shouldn't be thrown away for one mistake. I reminded him it was 6 months of daily choices, thousands of small betrayals that added up to this moment. When he tried to go inside to talk to the girls, my brothers physically blocked him. Tom, who'd been Mark's golf buddy for years, told him he'd lost the right to traumatize those children further today. My brother Michael, the quiet one who rarely showed emotion, had tears in his eyes as he said he couldn't believe Mark had used his niece's college funds for his affair. The betrayal wasn't just against me, but against the entire family who'd welcomed him, trusted him, loved him. Mark's phone rang again, probably Alexandra calling back, but I'd already powered it off. I handed it to him, noting how he clutched it like a lifeline. His parents would hear about this within hours, the family grapevine being what it was. His mother, who'd always preferred me to her own son, would be devastated. His father, who'd cheated on his mother repeatedly, would probably understand all too well. The sun had nearly set by the time Mark finally left. He'd thrown his golf clubs in his car, the victory of beating Tom now meaningless. He tried one more time to talk to me, claiming he loved me, that we could work through this. I asked him if he loved me when he was in room 412 at the Marriott. He had no answer for that. As his car disappeared down the driveway, I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief exactly, but a loosening of the knot I'd carried for months. The family slowly came back together as darkness fell. The food was reheated, though appetites were sparse. My parents' anniversary had been overshadowed, but my mother hugged me tight and whispered that my courage was the best gift I could have given her. She'd rather have a daughter who stood up for herself than one who suffered in silence for appearance's sake. The children returned to the lawn as fireworks began across the sound. Amy and Grace curled up on either side of me on a blanket, their warm bodies grounding me in the present. When Grace asked where Daddy went, I told her he needed some time to think about his choices. Amy, always the more perceptive twin, asked if Daddy had been bad. I told her that sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt people they love, and when that happens, there have to be consequences. The fireworks reflected off the water, creating double bursts of color. My family surrounded us, their presence a protective circle. Jennifer held my hand while Tom's wife brought me a glass of wine. My father sat behind us, his hand on my shoulder, a silent promise of support. Even my teenage nephew, usually glued to his phone, came to sit nearby, offering the solidarity of presence, if not words. Between the booms and crackles of fireworks, I could hear my phone buzzing with messages. Mark probably, though I'd blocked his number. Maybe Alexandra, though she had no way to contact me. Perhaps mutual friends who'd already heard through social media's lightning-fast gossip network. None of it mattered right now. What mattered was my daughter's hands in mine, my family's unconditional support, and the first glimpse of freedom I'd felt in months. As the grand finale lit up the sky in rapid succession of gold and silver stars, I thought about independence. Today was Independence Day for America, but it was also my personal Independence Day. Freedom from lies, from gaslighting, from pretending everything was fine when it was falling apart. The last firework exploded in a shower of red, white, and blue, and Amy sleepily asked if we could do this again next year. I promised her we would, though everything else would be different. The battle that followed was everything Patricia had warned me about, and worse. Mark immediately hired his own attorney, some shark from Hartford, who specialized in high-asset divorces. He tried to claim I'd been planning this for months, that I'd hidden assets, that my public revelation was emotional abuse that damaged his reputation and career. The irony of him claiming I damaged his reputation when he'd been having an affair with a subordinate was not lost on anyone. The first Monday after the reunion, Mark was served divorce papers at his office. Patricia had arranged for it to happen discreetly, but news travels fast in financial firms. By lunch, everyone knew. Alexandra had already requested a transfer to the New York office, apparently realizing that being known as the homewrecker who destroyed a marriage with 2 children wasn't great for her career trajectory. Mark texted me frantically that day, alternating between begging for another chance and threatening to take everything. The custody battle began immediately. Mark demanded 50-50 custody, claiming he'd been an involved father. I presented documentation showing he'd missed 70% of school events, hadn't been to a parent-teacher conference in 2 years, and couldn't name the girls' teachers, doctors, or best friends. The guardian ad litem, appointed by the court, interviewed Amy and Grace, who innocently mentioned that Daddy was always on his phone or at work, that Mommy did homework and bedtime and Saturday morning pancakes. Financial discovery revealed more than even I had found. Mark had opened 3 credit cards I didn't know about, all maxed out. He'd been siphoning money from our joint accounts into a separate savings account for 8 months. Most damaging, he'd liquidated bonds we'd bought for the girls' education. Nearly $30,000 meant for their future spent on hotels, jewelry, and expensive dinners. The forensic accountant Patricia hired found it all, creating a paper trail that made Mark's attorney visibly wince during mediation. Mark's parents, Susan and Richard, reached out to me 2 weeks after the reunion. They came to the house while Mark was at work, bringing flowers and shame in equal measure. Susan cried as she apologized, saying she'd raised him better than this. Richard, who'd cheated throughout his own marriage, seemed smaller, older, defeated. They assured me they'd still be grandparents to Amy and Grace, that their son's choices wouldn't change their love for the girls. They also mentioned they'd be willing to testify about patterns they'd observed if needed. The social fallout was swift and brutal, at least for Mark. Our mutual friends divided quickly. Those with children sided with me almost universally. The wives in our social circle, many of whom had their own suspicions about their husbands, rallied around me with fierce protectiveness. They brought casseroles, watched the girls when I had legal appointments, and shared their own stories of survival. The husbands were more complicated. Some avoiding me like adultery was contagious, others quietly expressing support while maintaining distance from the scandal. Mark tried to control the narrative on social media, posting about how people grow apart, how modern relationships are complex, how the girls were his priority. I posted nothing, letting my silence speak volumes. Jennifer, however, had no such restraint. She posted a scathing response to his claims, detailing the financial fraud, the affair with a subordinate, the abandonment of his children for afternoon hotel encounters. It went viral in our Connecticut suburban circle, shared by women who saw their own fears reflected in my story. At work, I threw myself into my projects with newfound energy. My boss, a woman who'd gone through her own messy divorce 5 years earlier, gave me flexibility when needed for legal appointments. My team rallied around me, picking up slack when I was overwhelmed, celebrating small victories in the legal process. The startup was launching a new product, and I channeled my anger into creating a marketing campaign so innovative it would later win industry awards. The mediation sessions were exercises in endurance. Mark showed up to the first one 40 minutes late, claiming traffic. He spent the entire time on his phone until the mediator threatened to report his behavior to the judge. He oscillated between playing victim and making demands. He wanted the house, claiming the girls needed stability. I pointed out stability didn't include a father who destroyed their family for a woman barely older than our babysitter. Patricia was brilliant, systematically destroying each of Mark's arguments with evidence. When he claimed equal contribution to household expenses, she produced 5 years of bank statements showing I'd paid 70% of bills while he spent his money on golf clubs and expensive watches. When he said he'd been the primary breadwinner, she showed my salary had exceeded his for the past 3 years. When he demanded alimony, she actually laughed before presenting the evidence of his affairs. The turning point came when Alexandra contacted Patricia directly. She'd been subpoenaed for a deposition and was panicking. She offered to provide evidence in exchange for being left out of public proceedings. What she provided was devastating for Mark's case. Screenshots of him claiming to be divorced, already promises to promote her once he was single, discussions about hiding assets from his greedy wife. She also revealed he'd pursued another junior employee before her, though that hadn't progressed beyond emotional affair territory. Mark's attorney requested a recess after seeing Alexandra's evidence. When we returned, their entire strategy had changed. Instead of fighting, they were ready to negotiate. The house would be mine. Primary custody would be mine, with Mark getting every other weekend and 1 dinner per week. He'd pay child support based on state calculations plus 70% of college costs. The retirement accounts would be split per state law, but I'd keep all personal property and the family car. He'd also have to repay the money taken from the girls' education funds within 2 years. The day we signed the settlement, Mark tried one more manipulation. Outside the courthouse, he approached me while Patricia was getting the car. He said he still loved me, that we could start over, that the girls needed their family together. I looked at this man I'd once promised to love forever and felt nothing but pity. I told him love wasn't just a word but daily choices, and he'd chosen Alexandra and excitement over Amy, Grace, and me every single day for months. His tears seemed genuine, but I'd learned his tears were just another performance. 6 months have passed since that 4th of July, and life looks nothing like I imagined it would. The house feels different without Mark's presence, but not empty. If anything, it feels fuller, like we've expanded to fill space that was always meant for just the 3 of us. Amy and Grace have adapted with the resilience children possess when given honesty and stability. They see their father every other weekend, returning Sunday nights with stories of pizza dinners and too much screen time. The divorce was finalized in October, just as the leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. Patricia had warned me I might feel sadness when the decree was signed, but all I felt was relief. That night I opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving and toasted myself in my kitchen wearing pajamas at 6 in the evening because I could. The girls asked what we were celebrating, and I told them we were celebrating new beginnings. We moved to a smaller but cozier apartment in West Hartford in November, still in the same school district, so the girls could maintain their friendships. The house sold quickly, young couples eager for that white picket fence dream. I used my portion to pay off debts, establish college funds that Mark couldn't touch, and create a safety net that meant I'd never be financially vulnerable again. The apartment has a view of Elizabeth Park, and we've developed a tradition of Saturday morning walks through the Rose Garden, followed by pancakes at a local diner. My job has flourished in unexpected ways. The product launch I'd poured my divorce anger into exceeded all projections, leading to a promotion to Vice President of Marketing. The raise that came with it means I don't worry about making ends meet on one income. My boss has become a mentor, teaching me about more than marketing, showing me how to rebuild after devastation. She told me success is the best revenge. Though I've learned success for its own sake feels even better. Mark married Alexandra last month, a quickie ceremony in Vegas that his parents didn't attend. Jennifer found out through Instagram, Alexandra posting photos of them at some chapel with Elvis officiating. She's already pregnant due in spring, and Mark's facing the reality of starting over with diapers and sleepless nights at 38. His career at the financial firm imploded after news of the affair spread. He works at a smaller company now, making less money, his reputation permanently stained by scandal. His parents remain part of our lives, taking the girls one Sunday a month for what they call grandparent adventures. Susan teaches them to bake cookies from scratch, while Richard helps with math homework. They never mention Mark during these visits unless the girls bring him up. Last week, Grace told them about Daddy's new wife having a baby, and Susan simply said that families come in all shapes and sizes, but love is what matters most. I've joined a support group for divorced women that meets Wednesday evenings at the community center. We range in age from 25 to 72 each, with stories of betrayal, survival, and renewal. I've shared my 4th of July revelation story several times, and it's helped other women find courage to stop accepting unacceptable behavior. We've become friends beyond the group, having wine nights where we laugh more than we cry, celebrating each other's victories no matter how small. Dating hasn't even crossed my mind yet, and that's okay. I'm learning who Suzanne is outside of being Mark's wife, outside of being defined by relationship status. I've taken up pottery classes, something Mark always mocked as cliché. Turns out I'm terrible at it, but love it anyway. There's something therapeutic about molding clay, about creating something from nothing, about starting over when it collapses. The metaphor isn't lost on me. Amy asked me last week if I hate Daddy. I told her I don't hate him, that hate takes too much energy better spent on loving her and Grace. I explained that I'm disappointed in his choices, hurt by his actions, but that those feelings don't define my life anymore. She seemed satisfied with that answer, then asked if we could get a dog now that Daddy's gone. Apparently his allergies were the only thing preventing pet ownership. We're visiting the shelter this weekend. Grace has been writing in a journal her therapist suggested, processing the divorce in her own way. She showed me an entry that made me cry grateful tears. She wrote that she wants to be like me when she grows up, strong and brave and kind, even when people hurt you. She wrote that Daddy made bad choices, but Mommy made good ones, like telling the truth even when it was hard. The therapist says both girls are remarkably well adjusted, crediting the stability I've maintained and the honesty with which I've handled their questions. The family reunions continue without Mark. Thanksgiving at my parents' house was initially awkward, his absence like a phantom limb. But by Christmas it felt natural, like he'd never belonged there at all. Tom's wife is pregnant with their first child, and Jennifer got engaged to a wonderful man who treats her like gold. Life moved forward as it always does, with or without those who choose to step off the path. Sometimes I drive past the Marriott downtown, and I feel nothing. Room 412 holds no power over me anymore. Sometimes I see couples fighting in public and wonder if she's found evidence, if he's denying what she knows is true, if they're at the beginning of their ending. But mostly I focus on my own journey, my own growth, my own happiness. That doesn't depend on anyone else's choices. That phone call on the 4th of July didn't destroy my life. It revealed a truth that was already there, hiding beneath the surface of perfection we'd constructed. The woman's voice saying she couldn't stop thinking about my husband wasn't the villain of my story. She was the catalyst for my liberation. Mark wasn't stolen from me. He gave himself away piece by piece, choice by choice, until there was nothing left worth fighting for. The lesson in all of this isn't about revenge or public humiliation, though I won't lie and say there wasn't satisfaction in that moment of revelation. The lesson is about recognizing your worth, refusing to accept less than you deserve, and having the courage to blow up your life when that life is built on lies. Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most profound freedom. I think about the woman I was a year ago, making excuses for Mark's behavior, pretending everything was fine, slowly dying inside while maintaining the perfect facade. I want to go back and hug her, tell her she's stronger than she knows, that she'll survive this and thrive beyond it. But we can't go back, only forward, carrying our scars like badges of honor. The truth doesn't destroy good things. It only reveals what was already broken. When someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the 6th month or the second affair or the depleted college funds. Trust your instincts when they scream that something's wrong, even when everyone else sees perfection. The 4th of July will always be Independence Day for me now, but not in the way the Founding Fathers intended. It's the day I declared independence from a marriage built on deception, from a life that looked perfect, but felt like prison, from a man who promised forever, but meant until something younger and more exciting came along. That unexpected phone call during our family reunion changed everything, just not in the way Mark expected. As I watch Amy and Grace sleeping peacefully in their beds, their faces relaxed in dreams, I know I made the right choice. They're learning that women don't have to accept betrayal, that marriages should be partnerships, not performances, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth in front of 30 relatives at a family barbecue. They're learning that their mother is more than just someone's wife, that she's a complete person deserving of respect and genuine love. Tomorrow marks 7 months since that phone call changed our lives. The girls and I are going to Elizabeth Park to feed the ducks, then to the movies, then for ice cream sundaes with extra whipped cream, because we can. It's a small life, a simple life, but it's an honest life. And after years of elaborate deception, simple honesty feels like the greatest luxury of all. My name is Suzanne. I'm 35 years old. I'm a divorced single mother of 2 beautiful girls. I'm a successful marketing executive. I'm a survivor of betrayal who chose truth over comfortable lies. And for the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. That woman who called my husband saying she couldn't stop thinking about him gave me an unexpected gift. She set me free. I want to leave you with this thought. If you're watching this and something resonates, if you're seeing red flags you've been painting white, if you're making excuses for someone who wouldn't make them for you, know that you deserve better. It's scary to blow up your life, to disappoint family, to become the subject of whispers and gossip. But living authentically, even if that means living alone, is infinitely better than dying slowly in a relationship built on lies. That phone call didn't end my marriage. It ended my prison sentence, and I've been free ever since. Have you ever had a moment where one phone call or discovery changed everything? How did you find the courage to choose yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of strength and survival. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone, that there's life after betrayal, that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and worthy of real, honest love. Until next time, this is Suzanne, choosing truth over comfort, authenticity over appearances, and freedom over false promises.